Our guest this week, filmmaker Zach Weintraub. We've got a very special show for you folks. Let's go. It's another episode of a very special show, and I'm your fortunate host, Kevin McManus. I'm the guy who gets to lead you through this exploration of the creative mind. And thank you so much for listening on YouTube, Spotify, Anchor, or wherever you're listening. Make sure you click that like, subscribe, or follow button. Also, go visit our website, averyspecialshow.com, or our Facebook page, Twitter page, Instagram page. Follow us wherever you're finding information these days. You can also contribute to the show at anchor.fm/averyspecialshow. As little as $1 a month will help us make this show even better for you. And patreon.com/averyspecialshow for digital subscription services. Now that the business is done, I want to talk about another subject that is very important to me, and it's this: silence. When I was very little, my grandmother would close out all the light and all the sound in a room, and she would sit there, and I would question her, why are you doing this? And she would say that the blank space, the emptiness, the nothingness of that space would allow for her mind to go to even more creative spaces. It would reduce her stress. It would inspire her to do even more with the powerful brain that she already had. And so I am now using this method. Whenever I feel writer's block or I can't create, I feel like I'm insecure or overly stressed, I now allow for silence. Turn off the devices, turn off the computers, the TVs, maybe go outside, maybe go on a bike ride. Don't bring the headphones, just nothingness. Absolute, utter nothingness. In that nothingness, there is a seed of an idea, an original idea that maybe you will never uncover if you don't allow for the silence and the nothingness to surround you, to wash over you. It's working for me. I'm really enjoying the level of stress reduction that I get from it, and I highly recommend it, especially, I know we're all kind of secluded in our homes at this point, but it's helpful to still give your brain some time to shut off, shut down, and just enjoy nothingness. Now that I, as a podcaster, have told you to listen to nothingness for a while, I'm going to go ahead and kick it on over to a half-hour interview with a brilliant filmmaker, Zach Weintraub. Take it away. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to a very special show. Once again, we have a very special guest. That is Zach Weintraub. How you doing, Zach?
Good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I just wanted to go ahead and give you a little moment here to tell us what you do, how you do it, and give you a little bit of space and time to kind of tell people who you are.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Zach. I'm a filmmaker from Olympia. And let's see, what does that mean, really? So the kind of films I make are narrative, fictional, and they tend to be feature length. I've written and directed 4 feature-length films, 3 of which were made in Olympia. And yeah, that's a tough question. And the bulk of that was sort of in the past, I guess. And I'm currently trying to sort of sort out what being a filmmaker really means for me at this point, and sort of actually scaling down the size of my projects and the scope of the projects and everything about them. But they were pretty small to begin with, in terms of crew, budget, of course.
From what I've heard about you, you studied, that sounds like you're kind of diverting from what you studied. You went to NYU, where you said you didn't do much, from what I've heard from other interviews. But then you went from that to, in 2013, when I heard about you the first time, I'm an avid reader of The Stranger. Here in the Puget Sound, we have a magazine called The Stranger, and they offer the Genius Award to different areas, like authors, writers, filmmakers, and I wanted to know a little bit about the history of going from NYU, where you didn't do much, to receiving a nomination for a Genius Award.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, yeah, I guess the film school experience was a good one in that, I lived in a wild city compared to where I was from and had so much access to just good movie going and made friends with tons of collaborators that, are still my collaborators now. So, but I didn't find the atmosphere very inspiring in terms of like actually making work or being productive. And I think that around that time this was like I was there like 2005 to 2009, and that was around the time that there was this like no budget independent film movement happening that you may have heard of called mumblecore, which is like a series of films that are loosely associated with each other because they are made without any money and they typically feature 20 somethings improvising dialogue and don't have a lot of plot. The height of this sort of loosely defined movement was around that exact time. And being in New York, it was easy to get access to these films, and they were super inspiring. Just because, as far as I knew, the idea of making a feature film, it was like, that's the ultimate goal. That's what you want to do, but there's no clear path to how you do that. The amount of money and permission from different people that it requires is really overwhelming. And then I would just watch these movies and in New York they were being released, and so I would go to the theater and see these movies and realize that this didn't take anything. This didn't take anybody's permission. It didn't take any big checkbook to do this, and that was just super inspiring. So and then of course the film school atmosphere, and especially NYU in particular, is just like it was very, very hard not to associate the price of a film, the budget of a film, with its quality. There's a lot of students there with a ton of family resources who are able to just like put together these insane productions, and it's pretty demoralizing from the perspective of somebody who isn't just going to pull $15,000 out of nowhere to make a 6-minute film. That was kind of the impetus to leave New York and get back home and do something on a small scale, because I knew after that, it was like, oh, well, digital video's super viable now and I can make a movie. In terms of, funding the movies, I mean, in general, I was pretty much responsible for paying for them. But I mean, these are films that were made like for under $10,000, which is not really normal. But, I was also, the first one, Bummer Summer, I was 22 years old when we shot it. So, and I'm 32 years old now. So, it's not really the same vibe, I guess. I couldn't really stomach bringing that many people together on a volunteer basis. So I think that
right.
It's just not the same thing anymore. There's a lot more conversation about people deserve to be paid, and that's 100% true. So that's kind of why I mentioned earlier the need to sort of scale down, because I'm not gonna just keep paying for movies myself out of pocket. There are other things that I want to do with the money that I earn. And yeah, I mean, even if I was paying $10,000 out of pocket to make a film, that's just not what a film would cost to me anymore, because the people that were involved would need to be compensated. Where were we? We didn't even get to the stranger award yet, but
that whole evening at the Fry, I was actually supposed to be there that night. I had read about you, and I guess I had passed by you in town because you and I were kind of hanging out in downtown Olympia around the same time. And I hadn't seen the work, and I believe, was it, I'm trying to remember, was it You Make Me Feel So Young that was the reason you were nominated, or was it just a kind of a collection of the films that you had already made, or?
I think it was sort of an overall, but I think that the big reason for that particular nomination was a film called The International Sign for Choking. which I had made in 2012 in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and the one of the film critics for The Stranger, Charles Mudede, is a really cool film critic and writer in general, was just super taken by that movie in particular and sort of championed that nomination, which was awesome.
I actually I got to work with Charles at one point. He wrote a film called Police Beat, and he himself has some toes dipped into the writing and the making of films around Seattle area, so that's kind of cool. You know, you were talking about how the mumblecore atmosphere of New York at that time was inspiring to you. It almost seems like to me, when I watch your films, I actually just tore myself away from Bummer Summer, but it kind of has this Linklater, Jarmusch, Slacker, Coffee and Cigarette similarities going on, the striking composition with the high contrast, the stark dialogue. Were you inspired by the likes of Linklater? I've heard you speak about Jarmusch before, but are those in any way inspiring directors for you?
Yeah, totally. Jarmusch more so than Linklater. I mean, I think that he's a good filmmaker, but I haven't felt as inclined to, I guess, steal from him personally. But Jim Jarmusch for sure. Yeah, and especially that film with the way it's shot in black and white, and it's sort of a dead end road trip type of movie. And actually, we watched Down by Law a lot. The cinematographer / producer and I, Nandan Rao, we watched Down by Law was one of the movies that we watched as a reference. Yeah, and I guess that is kind of contrary to the overall mumblecore aesthetic, the idea of those, static compositions and more sparse dialogue. But I think that is in terms of mumblecore, it's more like the ethos and the attitude that was super inspiring, and I suppose the naturalistic dialogue. I mean, it's an interesting sort of crossroads because I am really drawn to minimal dialogue and sort of taking away. But at the same time, I like naturalistic dialogue and I like improv.
Hello? What's up? Not much. What are you doing? Oh. I'm with Maya.
Who's that?
One sec. It's Liam. Wait, what? Well, I'm busy right now. Maybe a couple hours. Okay. Okay, bye.
What do you want?
He was with Alex and they wanted to play music.
Are you gonna go?
Maybe later. Not right now.
If you want to hang out with them, you can.
No, I want to hang out with you.
Well, are you gonna go later?
Maybe. Depends. Are we gonna hang out?
Thought we were.
What are we doing?
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Oh. I guess we'll see then. But I'll hang out with you. For now, at least. What?
Nothing.
That was an excerpt from Bummer Summer. It is interesting to watch the spare style of your dialogue kind of contrast or kind of work with and against the way you use your shots to show the characters. If you watch a Weintraub film, you'll notice that he rarely follows the physical action, but he'll follow the emotional action of the character that you're not necessarily drawn to physically. You'll watch, as in You Make Me Feel So Young, and you're watching Justine kind of go through all these emotional changes. You use the camera to follow Justine and her kind of her journey, and I thought that was a really interesting way of using the composition. But you I've heard you talk about how you write your scripts. You do write a story, but you don't write a huge amount of dialogue. It's a lot of improvisation. do you direct to the character arches, or do you direct to the improvised dialogue? How does that work for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way that the movie usually looks on paper is, or I guess always, this is always the case. Basically, it looks a lot like screenplay format, but with no dialogue. I mean, and that's probably just a relic of my film education and learning screenplay format and kind of obsessing over that when I was in high school. I'll still have like the all caps, like scene heading, exterior, interior, and the sort of the description of the location and who's there. There just won't be any dialogue. Instead, under the scene heading, it will just be sort of, I mean, depending on the size of the scene, it'll be maybe 1 to 3 short paragraphs describing exactly what happens. And I don't write really even a single line of dialogue. So what that looks like in the case of these features we're talking about, it's usually like 15 to 18 pages. The story's all there. Whatever comes out of improv, it doesn't ever really inform the plot. It's more just like we know what's meant to happen in that scene, and it's more about sort of tuning the improvisation to what's meant to happen. And sometimes, as we're improvising, we realize that what I wrote it doesn't feel right. That a conversation or whatever conversation I suggested should happen would actually happen in that scenario. So there have been cases where through improvising we realize this scene should work a little bit differently, or it might have a slightly different outcome, but its place in the overall narrative is typically the same regardless.
The cinematography, I know you work with a director of photography. Is that Nandan Rao? That's your director of photography. And so there's an appealing fuzziness to the shots, and it's kind of like a dream, or like you're waking up. And it seems like there's a lot of forethought that goes into exactly the spots that you want to feature. Do you guys work together on that, or is that something that you credit Nandan with?
It's interesting because, I mean, he and I met at film school, like pretty much week 1, and just became super good friends right away. And then when we were finished, he basically volunteered. I told him I had this idea to go back to Olympia and shoot a feature film. And he was like, I want to go, and I want to do that with you. So, and I was like, of course, that's that would be incredible. So, and he's a lot more technically competent than I am when it comes to cameras and cinematography. The aesthetic, it's funny because sometimes I try to sort of piece together how it materialized, and I can't really pinpoint any specific conversation because we had never really made anything together officially until we made Bummer Summer. And I don't know. I think that aesthetic just sort of materialized. And then, of course, I think that the shooting style of Bummer Summer is a little bit different. It's a lot more still and like wide. There's not a lot of there's not as many like of the sort of drifting pans or the things that might create the sort of dreamlike quality that you just mentioned. But but I mean, he shot all 4 of my feature films, so the aesthetic is definitely this sort of evolving thing that we sort of check in occasionally and have conversations about. But I think it just comes down to us sort of having very similar aesthetics, because I think a lot of the time it's just not that we don't talk about it as much as you might expect when we're shooting. It's just sort of I know probably what he'll want to do. He knows what I want to do, and I don't know. It's been a cool relationship. We haven't worked together for several years now, because time just goes by like that.
I know. I was just looking at that. Some of your, like, you've done the 4 films as Bummer Summer, The International Sign for Choking, You Make Me Feel So Young, and Slackjaw are the 4 that we kind of keep referencing. And there's another short film in there, right, kind of in the middle. And it's been a little while. You've still been acting a little bit. I've noticed that there's another film in post production that you're in right now. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you're talking about A Dim Valley, which just got finished.
Is that kind of the direction you're going?
No.
Are you going to be acting more rather than directing?
No, I don't think so. Acting is not. I really like it, and it's so fun to just be an actor. versus like owning the project, which is just so stressful in so many ways. And acting is like, oh, you get to be part of the production. You're part of that. You get that family vibe. You're essential to the project, but like the responsibility is just not on you at the end of the day. But no, I don't
Right.
I don't really pursue. I think a lot of any acting role I've had has been somebody that I know personally reaching out to me. So I don't think that's gonna happen more necessarily. Although I hope that I get to keep doing it. But yeah, those 4 films were like, it was sort of this period of like intense making, and it kind of ended with Slackjaw, which is my last feature that we shot in 2015, because Nundan sort of, I mean, he's obviously super talented and had been doing some other DP gigs and just wasn't that satisfied with the independent filmmaking world in general, and decided he wasn't really going to do it anymore. Those projects stopped, and then, we were growing up, like I mentioned, and money just was more of a thing, and projects were going to cost more, and if I had my own money, it was less and less likely that I was going to funnel it into one of these things. And so yeah, that's why, I mean, we haven't worked together for a few years now. He kind of did a career change, and so did I actually, but I mean, I don't consider career and artistic practice to be the same thing necessarily.
We'll be right back with Zach Weintraub right after the break.
This episode of a very special show was made possible by contributions from Oli Arts. Oli Arts is the South Puget Sound's premier multi-platform arts publication. They are dedicated to highlighting the amazing arts and culture our community creates. They deliver information about performance, music, visual arts, and cultural events around the South Puget Sound via multiple mediums. Oli Arts offers a bi-monthly print edition, daily online content, occasional podcasts, and enhanced mobile experiences. Oli Arts is the guide to local arts and culture, from the drama of locally produced theater to the eclectic beauty of the Procession of the Species and semi-annual Olympia Arts Walk. Oli Arts print edition is hand-delivered by arts aficionados to local theater and concert patrons, while weekly online updates are curated and customized for local interests. For advertisers and community partners, Oli Arts provides unique access to a highly valued demographic of South Puget Sound audiences and readers. Whether you were born here or you're just visiting for the day, Oli Arts is your expert guide to arts and culture. Find free, up-to-date coverage of local events and happenings at olyarts.org. That's OLYARTS.org.
And now for the feature of the week. Arts Fund strengthens the community by supporting the arts through leadership, advocacy, and grant-making. Arts Fund's vision is a community with a dynamic and world-class arts and cultural sector where the arts are accessible to all and valued as central and critical to a healthy society. Arts Fund, along with a coalition of arts and cultural organizations, created the COVID-19 Arts Emergency Relief Fund. It provides short-term relief in the form of unrestricted grants to arts organizations which have been particularly hard hit during this public health emergency. The global pandemic is having a catastrophic effect on nonprofit arts and cultural organizations. The Arts Foundation seeded the fund with $1 million, and additional gifts and pledges have pushed that total to over $2,650,000. They wish to continue to grow the fund and anticipate making a second round of relief grants available soon. Visit artsfund.org if you are an organization looking for a grant or you'd like to give to this cause. And now back to the interview with Zach Weintraub. So I always ask these, there's two questions I always ask of the people on my show, and the first one is, what do you struggle with? And I know it's a broad question, but just generally when you're creating or in your personal life, as far as like, what are you struggling with as an artist?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I have an answer for you too. So I think that the biggest struggle lately is pushing through that phase where a project is an idea that you have or something you're writing or developing to, something you're doing. And it was super easy during that phase when Nanda and I were working together a lot because he was there to say, like, what are you doing? Like, let's make it happen. And if it wasn't Nandan, it was my friend Bradley Smith, who produced the International Sign for Choking and Slackjaw. He's just, something that is a missing piece for me is having a collaborator in whatever role it is that's going to be checking in with me and saying, like, what are you doing? Are you sitting around right now? Like, or are you making this project happen? And when are we going to do it? Because I'm excited about it. Yeah, I guess accountability. It's very easy to just, I can easily imagine myself just sort of, because I think when you come up with an idea for a film, there's sort of this, this isn't true of everyone. I know there are some people that spend 10 years on some, huge passion project, just trying and trying and trying to get it off the ground. But I feel like ideas for me have a sort of expiration date where maybe it's something that, a lot of my ideas are very, very tied to whatever I'm going through in life at that time. And so that's naturally going to have an expiration date. And projects exist in my head as ideas for a certain period of time. And if they don't materialize as films, I'm probably going to lose my attachment to that idea, whether or not it became a movie. So if it became a movie during that time, great. That is the best possible outcome. But also, there's plenty of movies that have just come and gone through my head because the momentum wasn't there to push them into reality.
If it's any help at all, I know that I am eagerly awaiting a fifth act from you, because I was just thinking about today, like a lot of these films that I'm watching, because I watched earlier today, I watched You Make Me Feel So Young, and then I was watching Bummer Summer just a bit ago, and I've seen the International Sign for Choking before. They all strike me. First of all, I'm an Olympian, so if you're an Olympian and you see some of these films and you're like, oh, that's Olympia, that's kind of cool in the first place. But then also you see a lot of familiar faces. You see this kind of common theme about Olympia where, this is where grunge started. There's a youth kind of, I don't want to say youthquake or whatever, but like a youthful kind of theme about Olympia. And it seems like you kind of capitalized on that. I would be interested to see what the Weintraub films of your age now and even older will look like, because you could throw back to those themes. You can continue to make those kind of like John Carpenter did back in the 80s, or it could grow into something more like reflecting your adulthood and seeing, kind of exploring that. I would be interested in seeing a lot more about that, but that's just my opinion. So I don't know if you listen to any part of my podcast but my first episode is about how I spent most of the time that you're talking about just in bars, drinking and doing drugs. And, I was an artist, but I was kind of like one of those fledgling artists who kind of wasted time. And it's so nice to see people were capitalizing on their talents at that time. And I'd love to see more from you. I just think that the work that you've done is great, and it'd be interesting to see what happens in the future.
That's awesome.
The other question is, what is important to you when you're creating? Now, again, these are humongous questions, and they're purposely so because I want to hear from you as deep as you can dig into your soul. When you're creating, what is the thing, the impetus, the compelling factors that make you want to create?
Yeah. Another great question. That's also huge. Let me think about this. So, there's got to be something to the fact that it's movies for me. That's when I have an idea or that sort of like, I guess, artistic impulse that's like, here's an idea, here's a concept, and you want to make something out of this. It's in movie form. I mean, that's how I see it in my head. That's how the idea comes to me. It's expressed in shots and cuts and all that. So, I mean, a lot of, but even before I made movies, which has been which I've been doing for quite a long time, I just love them in general. So I guess movie making is an opportunity to what am I trying to say? It's cool. I guess the bottom line is it's an opportunity to make the movie that you want to see. And it's sort of a catch-22 because, I mean, anyone that has made a film of any scale will probably understand the feeling of the finished product just not, it's going to disappoint you in some way, or it's going to make you cringe to watch this or that scene, or you're always going to want, kick yourself for that one line of dialogue that sounds weird, or that one cut that doesn't work. So it's like you're sort of chasing that movie that you have in your head that you would love to see, and it's a sad fact of life that it's never necessarily going to materialize, but you can keep trying to approach that, make a film that you make the film you want to see, and it's going to let you down in so many ways, and then you get to try again and see if you can come closer.
Look at this young man. What was he running from? Why does he dance when he knows of injustice? Look at this young man. So full of potential. Something is building inside of him. Look at this young man again. Driven to action, newly determined. Robert Maloney's Slackjaw.
And that was an excerpt from Slackjaw.
I think that when I'm working, when I'm shooting, that's what I have in mind. Is just like, oh, is this gonna hit that right note that is cinema? I guess for me, like, is this gonna, sometimes you can tell when you shoot a scene. It's like, oh, that's great. Like, that was funny, or that was powerful, or that look was really good, or this is gonna cut super, super well from the last scene that I know we already got. And
so the when I get onto IMDb and I'm reading about your films, I was reading through the just kind of like the general descriptions, and they were much more poetic, and I'm sure that you had something to do with writing them. But the one that kind of jumped out to me and kind of I would like to highlight is the one from You Make Me Feel So Young, and it takes place in a nameless city, which first of all I love that you're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But it's a carefully selected collection of moments from the life of a young woman in transition and a meditation on the subtly complex questions one often faces in such situations. I would say, just from what I've seen, that almost applies to all of your films, obviously not the young woman in transition, but you're carefully selecting these collections of moments, and I guess maybe that's part of the mumblecore style or something. But it almost is this refreshing thing where you don't have to be so attentive to the movie. The movie is, and you're not having to be so attentive to it to draw this story out. It's just happening in front of you. It's carefully selected moments rather than this intensely, okay, I gotta focus or else I'm gonna lose something here. And I think it's just kind of a refreshing way to go to see the cinema. I think you succeeded if that was what you were trying to accomplish. And I really want to tell you how much I appreciate you being on the show today. We are going to go ahead and cut it off here. If there's anything else you want to say, maybe talk to us a little bit about what New Heart Entertainment is going to be up to in the future, what you're working on personally, and then we'll leave it off there.
Cool. Yeah. Well, let's see. So, yeah, you mentioned New Heart Entertainment, which is sort of my production banner. It's not a real company by any legal standard, but for the future, I mean, like I said, this sort of era of these Fast and Furious like feature films being cranked out for no money is over, and that's fine. So it's always a question of what am I going to do next, because I'm not done doing this. I'm not done making films. So yeah, I think you're going to see more work that's, if you can believe it, even smaller than these films already are. Possibly shorter. I don't really feel comfortable making short films. I don't know how people come up with good ideas for them, but they do. I can't. But maybe mid-length films. I mean, the last film I made was 25 minutes, and has sort of a stigma attached to it. It's a super weird length of time, or it's considered a weird length of time for a film, but I kind of like it, so I might work with that more. Thanks, Kevin. It's been good talking to you.
Yeah, man.
Just like 2 weeks ago, I put everything online for free.
Great.
New Heart Entertainment.
I actually didn't know that. I wish I did. Great. Okay, so Newhard, NEWHARD.com, or entertainment, excuse me, and you know how to spell that, .com, and go ahead and stream those movies. They are well worth the watch, every single one of them. I think you'll be addicted, especially with the summer coming. Watch Bummer's Summer. That one's one of my favorites so far. I love that. And thank you so much, Zach. Have a really wonderful rest of your pandemic, and we'll see you on the other side, okay?
Thanks, Kevin. All right, sounds good.
All right. Yeah. Take care, man.
Bye-bye.
This one is for the young creators. Like you, I grew up in a time when a fire hose of ideas was coming from one side and a flamethrower of opinions was coming from the other. Someone once told me that you don't have to take the advice of anyone you don't want to become. And I didn't understand it that well at the time, and now I understand it much better. When you are allowing ideas into your world, when you are adopting opinions and thoughts, and when you are creating from a space within you. You have control over that space, and never give that control away. Own that control. Develop your own ideas about the world based on what you see and what you know and what you feel. That's not to say you can't have knowledge, data, or information that permeates your thinking processes, but how you feel inside and from where you create should be designed strictly and solely by you. What do you want to create? If it's love, which I hope that it is, then create from love. Create from an ultimate passionate desire of love, and you will always be surrounded by the love that you create. I allowed myself to become a different kind of person for a very long time, and now I'm reclaiming my mind, my body, and my soul, and I am directing all of the energy that I have toward love. I hope you young people out there today shut down the noise, allow the silence in, and start creating from a place of love. Keep loving and keep creating. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Our guest next week, music producer, audio engineer, and founder of Sub Pop Records, Bruce Pavitt. Please visit averyspecialshow.com for more information about the podcast. This has been a production of a Very Special Network.